Well, hey, my brothers, Hugh Halter here, round 3. Good to be with you a little bit more, whether or not you're in the morning, early, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're with the brothers. Glad to be able to share a little bit more with you. If I look a little haggard, it's because I am. I've been working a paint job right next door to my house for about the last 10 days. And it's one of those 200-year-old houses, kind of Victorian plantation style with the huge eaves and cornices and all these thingamajiggers. I've had to have my son-in-laws help me out, a few of the guys in our community. But man, it's been rough. We had to actually break out the old grinder machine. I don't know if you ever use one of these. You can't, it's like 200 years of paint layers. You can't just like scrape things off. You actually have to get this big metal wire like whisking brush, and it goes on this big grinder, and you just so it takes it right down to the bare wood, bare cement, whatever you're doing. And I almost like ended a good portion of my life a few days ago. I was actually up on the high lift, and I was grinding some of these corners, and I put the machine down, but I did not let the wheel stop turning. So if the wheel's still turning, there's pretty big inertia, and I think I was just impatient trying to get stuff done. And when it hit the floor of the high lift, it bounced onto my shoe, and then it bounced up and grabbed the corner of my loose cut off sweatpants that I had. And within about a second, it had tore up and coagulated my entire shorts, ripping and grinding and raveling, and then it plowed right into my man package, and I felt like somebody hit me with a hockey puck. I went down, was laying there with my feet hanging out of the high lift at 20 feet, and I don't know if you've ever had an injury, table saw, whatever, but you're afraid to look to see what carnage has ensued. So I finally tore this thing out of my groinal region and assessed the damage. And whereas I thought I was going to be well suited to actually help direct the women's ministry of CPC, everything was there. We're all intact. A few bumps and bruises, scrapes and whatnot. But I tell you, we got to talk about grinding a little bit today, because we're in our 3rd week of Isaiah 58, and some of you may be wondering why I'm just like hanging in this thing. And it's because I really feel like we can't just do cute little men's talks right now. I feel like the way things have been going lately, it's as if something has to be revealed that maybe wasn't there. My son-in-law was asking me as we were working, he's like, so what are we doing and how we're painting this house versus how other professionals would do it? And I just told him, I said, look, we're doing as good as we can do without bringing it all the way, without grinding the entire house down. Because to do it correctly, you would have to take 200 years of paint all the way down to the brick. Otherwise, there's just no way for it to be perfect. So we're grinding it down as best we can, but there has to be, when you have something that you've neglected for so long, and then all you're doing is putting on a quick little 10-year smile on the thing, kind of like make the pig look a little bit better for 10 years. That's essentially what we're doing in America, and oftentimes with our own spiritual life. We're not taking it all the way down, stripping it down to the level where God can do his work. And that's why I feel like we had to take some time and really assess whether or not we're listening to God, whether or not we're paying attention to the really important parts of our life. Because that's what the prophets do. That's why Isaiah 58 is there, is that God's people neglected, they've gone through religious motions, but they've neglected the weightier aspects of life and what that means. And so, we're in the grinder right now. I don't know if you can remember the first tragedy of 2020. Give it a second. I won't tell you. It actually happened in your state. Like, where people go, that was the first big tragedy of 2020. And if you said Kobe Bryant going down the helicopter, you're right. That was one that we all remember, maybe because, whether or not we liked basketball, everybody knew Kobe. We knew how vibrant and young he was, how young his daughter was that perished with him. And if you remember 2 to 4 weeks after that event, and I don't know if I've ever had more guys talk about their mortality than during that time. Like all of a sudden it made us face something really serious that maybe we had acted like wasn't there. We just painted over it, so to speak. And so all of a sudden guys are dealing with that. And we thought, okay, well, we'll move past, we'll heal past the Kobe. And it's been one grinder after another, from turning over the rocks of deep division in our country over racial issues to COVID comes in and just starts to wreak havoc. In our community, we've now had half of our community that's got COVID, so 20 of our 40 have had it or have had somebody very close. We now have a father that's about my age that is barely hanging on for life. And it's just like week after week, it's like the grinder keeps going, and then half of the western slope of our country is burning away, as many of you know that are watching this. So some call this an apocalyptic time, and in many ways it is. You know, the apocalyptic actually only means to unveil. It doesn't mean just end time stuff. It's that there's a very deep unveiling of what's going on, and I feel like that's what God's doing. Why He's not just saving the day is there. You know, it's like maybe He was trying to get our attention in less severe ways, but sometimes you only wake up and smell the roses when you really have had something really serious happen. And I feel like we would be missing it if we just moved on to some super optimistic, cute little talk. So we'll get there because there's some really good news in the story. But I want to read some quotes from a book that I've been reading called The Fourth Turning, subtitle, What the Cycles of History Tell Us About America's Next Rendezvous with Destiny. If you want to pick it up, it's by William Strauss and Neil Howe. And they basically are saying that in the course of history, you can watch a progression of cycles, and it always happens. About every 20 to 25 years, there's a turning, okay? And so I want you to listen to what they said here. The first turning in our lifetime, in our generations, network of generations, is what they call the high, which is the most recent one that we've had in America, and it would have been in the Industrial Revolution era, just following World War II, okay? In this first turning, as he calls it, the high season, and it's an upbeat era. Everything is generally going pretty well. There's a strengthening of our institutions. Our civic order is reinforced, and it's kind of like the glory days. The second turning he calls the awakening, where in a sense everything is questioned, is passionate spiritual upheaval around social issues. So if you remember 1960s, right? That's essentially the awakening period that many of us have lived through. The third turning is what he calls the unraveling, where personal interests are pursued. During the 1980s, 1990s, when this book is written, it's essentially the unraveling part, where you begin to have some culture wars, some eruption of some societal issues, but where individualism is strengthened and institutions begin to be weakened. Okay, and then he says the fourth turning, which they surmised, now again, they wrote this back in the 80s, they said they thought it would come between 2005 and 2025, the fourth turning, which is really called the crisis, where there's a decisive era of secular upheaval. The old order is toppled and the new one is begin to put in place. In other words, for Strauss and Howe, history is a cyclical and seasonal event. And they say that we are in what they call the winter cycle. And the winter cycle can be long and difficult, or brief and severe, but winter cannot be averted. Like, you just can't get away from it. It's eventually just going to happen. It's why the Romans eventually were wiped out. It's every single sort of empire eventually loses its footing, and these are the cycles that it goes through. And so this is what he says about winter. Some who have not quoted the source have written that the particular winter is more than just winter, but more like a mini ice age, that we ought to prepare ourselves and our organizations, our families, and our finances accordingly. The fourth turning will catalyze, so basically right now, the fourth turning will catalyze a crisis mood. Remnants of the old social order will disintegrate, political and economic trust will implode, real hardship will beset the land, and with severe distress that could involve and probably will involve questions of class, race, nation and land and empire. The very survival of the nation will feel at stake. Is that not how we'll feel? That's why we have to go through this apocalyptic unveiling. We have to man up. We got for the grinder to stop in our own personal lives. We've got to assess and really take stock of where we're at with this. This is why, like when you watch Jesus with religious people, remember this guy named Nicodemus in the book of John, chapter 3. This will be extra credit for you to read this week, but a very religious, well-versed man goes to Jesus by night because his religious system's not cutting it, and so he goes to Jesus. And Jesus doesn't just say, well, just make a few tweaks and, try to get your daily devotions in and, go to church, do all that stuff. He actually cuts to the core and he says, bro, you're not going to be able to get on with things until you have a spiritual rebirth, till you're born again. And the guy freaks out. He doesn't, well, what do you mean? I have to enter my mother's womb? And Jesus is basically teaching him, yeah, you need a total redo, bro. Like little tweaks are not going to cut it. And this is what we're talking about, guys. We need to be reborn. This is a day and age where we can't just settle on our recreational religious ways of life. We actually, I think, have to either be all in or we'd be wiser to get out, to be honest with you. And if you're, maybe you punted out of the church thing a long time ago, maybe some of you watching, you've never really thought about the Jesus thing and you're processing it, but I want to make it easy on you. Jesus would talk you out of it if you just want to sort of half-ass it. It's always been about either fully in, and by the way, if you will go fully in, you will fully find life. And if you half-hearted or limp-wristed into this thing, it just doesn't go. There's one passage out of Isaiah 58, just one point I want to key in on. So we don't have to read a lot this week, but I believe it's verse 5. It says, you cannot fast as you do today and expect to be heard on high. Let me say it again. You cannot fast or be religious as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. There seems to be this part where Jesus is going, guys, I do listen. There's another passage. What's it say? It's 2 Chronicles. It says, for the eyes of the Lord move to and fro across the earth, that he may be a strong support to those whose heart is completely his. Again, same type of idea, that he wants to extend himself to us. He wants to show up. He wants to speak. He wants to guide us. But he does it, he kind of reserves it for those who he knows are like putting him first. He's the main thing. He's not just a weekend add-on or a way to grow your business. So I don't know if you've heard of a way of spirituality called the Shema Spirituality, and it's really our Judeo-Christian beginning. It's where God begins with his people, and it's out of Deuteronomy 6. It says, "Hear, O Israel," this is any ancient Hebrew, modern day Jew, this is everything rises and falls on this Shema, this statement. The Lord our God is one. So love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. So for God, he was saying, look, you gotta bring it all in, guys. It doesn't work as a sideshow for you. There's another passage that even strengthens the idea more out of James, where James is saying this, like when you ask God for wisdom, don't be, have faith. Don't fail in faith, because you'll be double-minded. You'll be unstable if you do that. So when you ask God things, like expect that he hears and really be in it. And to be double-minded is what this whole passage is about. You can't have a disintegration between what you think and believe and how you act and what you expect from God. James says, this type of man, this type of double-minded man should not think that he will receive anything from the Lord. So what does that mean? Like, do any of us fully, perfectly? Of course not. We don't get it. But what he's saying, it's not an aspect of making mistakes. It's really an aspect of your devotion of heart. Like, are you at a heart level in? Even the Apostle Paul said, look, I don't get it all right with my mind, and with my heart, I desire all the things of God, but then I'm a sucker. What a wretched man I am. That's what he says. He's one of the great spiritual leaders of our faith. But God knew the direction and the passion of Paul's heart. Same thing with David, who, sleeps with Bathsheba and then gets her husband killed and loses his kingdom. But it says that David was a man after God's heart, because God knew ultimately that David really was all in. He had a rough moment here and there, but he was all in, and he was serious about it. So I just want you to think about that this week. Is the sole passion of your life to know God and to be involved in what he's doing? Or has God been a means to bless you and help you and protect you? But is he really the one that you follow? I guess that's why we always would say, the goal of Jesus isn't just to get you saved, it's to get you following. He wants men with him in this life, because we are entering an ice age where what the world needs are not recreational Christians. They need men that they can hang their own lives on. I don't know if you realize this, but oftentimes we hold each other's faith. That there will be mornings where Hugh is really strong, and I can hold you up when you're weak, and there's other days where Hugh is weak. The month after our son passed, I was weak. I had to ask guys, hold me up. When I was traveling, I felt more vulnerable with thinking about other women. I just call guys, I just told them, I'm weak, hold me, I need your faith to hold me up. But this is the era that we're in, guys. We need Shema. We need men right now. We don't need fakes. We don't need frauds. We don't need perfect men. But we need men that go, the Lord, my God, is one, and I will love him with all my heart, my soul, my strength. So this week, I really want you to process commitment, covenant, just like you would enter a covenant of marriage with your wife. Would you be at a level of covenant with God? There's an old devotional book I remember using way back in my early 20s called My Heart, Christ's Home. And the idea spiritually is that when God enters your life, you have to give him the whole house. You can't just bring him into the living room and go, glad to have you here, and then leave your kitchen and your garage and your bathroom just full of crap. You can't just say, God, I want you in my financial life, but then you keep your sexual life kind of hands off. You hide it in a closet. When you let Jesus enter, as you're reborn day by day, you basically go, hey, come on in, have the whole house, make yourself at home, because it's your house now. And so let's do a little analyzing and make sure there aren't any rooms or closets or cracks and crevices that we have told Jesus you don't get to enter. So God bless you today, and praying for you all in Jesus' name. Amen.